I wonder how many people.
I wonder if my mum's watching. Hi, mum.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Shane. I am the chief protagonist at Ourea Events, organizer of many races, Dragon's Back Race, Cape Wrath Ultra, Northern Traverse, and others. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Jay Grady from Trail and Error and Edwina Sutton from Tea and Trails, and also my colleague Charlotte, who's in our office in Kendal. I'm actually in Cornwall at the moment. I'm taking a little break from a holiday. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So please feel free to say hello to other people attending this evening. You can hit the chat function and send a little message. I've just put in a little message saying hello myself. If you have a question for us, there's a Q&A function. Please ask any questions as we go along, and we will do our very best to answer all of those questions either kind of as they come up or at the end. We'll run through those questions. If for whatever reason your internet cuts out, this is being recorded. It will be uploaded onto YouTube later. If my internet cuts out, Charlotte takes over. It has happened before. It has happened before. So bear with us if there's any tech problems. But let's get started. I'm really excited. I'm kind of turning the tables on Eddie and Jay tonight because I've listened to both of them chat to the community of ultra runners, trail runners, and I've really enjoyed their podcasts, and I'm honestly say two of my absolute favorite trail running podcasts. Both Eddie and Jay have done our events, so they really get it as a participant. So tonight I'm gonna talk to them about their experience as participants at our events, and also they can bring context to all of their experiences and other organizers they've chatted with, other participants they speak with. But before we get started, I'm in Cornwall, Charlotte's in Kendal. Eddie, first, whereabouts are you in the world?
Well, I'm going to make everybody sick with jealousy, but I am in the middle of a very sunny evening in the French Alps. Very lucky to be here, but I am surrounded by three children who are running wild in the garden, and very occasionally I can just see a foot coming to the window. So if you hear a loud bang, that's what that is. But yeah, right in the middle of the Alps.
Fantastic. And Jay, I know roughly where you are.
Yeah, you've been here. I am in Cornwall also, a few miles away from you at the moment, Shane. Yeah, I have Labradors running wild outside. So
well, the same then. Same.
So if you hear a bang, also it's they've got bored of PlayStation and they've come outside to throw a ball around.
Brilliant. Well, I want to jump straight into the deep end, and Jay, I'm going to ask you first. I'm, as an organizer, often asked, how does Dragon's Back compare to Cape Wrath? So Jay is a recent finisher of the Cape Wrath Ultra in full, and last year was a Dragon's Back hatchling finisher. You have been there, you've seen both. Talk us through, how do they compare as a participant? How do they measure up? Pros and cons of each.
Wow, there's I mean they're approximately the same distance, and there's a massive difference in races though. So the first thing that struck me on Cape Wrath this year was that we were following the natural way through the glens. We were following a nice path, whereas on Dragon's Back you can look at the most horrible peak in your vista and know that you're highly likely to be going over it with a good level of certainty. So there was a kind of a relief as I started on Cape Wrath, where we could look at these beautiful mountains around us, but knowing that I wasn't trying to pick up visually all the tiny ants that were crawling up it that would soon be me. So that's a big change. It's more, I would say there's more running involved in Cape Wrath, or there's less power hiking up the hills. Very different. In terms of difficulty, Dragon's Back is without doubt more difficult because of those summits that you have to hit. And this is almost a cliche now, but it's because I've said it so many times, but it's Cape Wrath is not easy. I'm not even sure I can say how much easier it is. It's not that much easier. It should, on paper, possibly on a Harvey map, be easier, but it didn't seem that much easier. Obviously, I didn't finish Dragon's Back in its entirety, but so Dragon's Back is definitely harder. Cape Wrath was just so many things. I mean, yeah, it's both very. I'm going back to do Dragon's Back probably next year, so we can possibly ask me again after that, and I'll have some more info. But yeah, very, very different races, but by no means didn't feel any easier.
Amazing. So we might circle back to the differences between kind of like the hatchling and the explorer and the full course later on, Jay. But first, Eddie, I wanted to ask you. So you've had an amazing result at the Northern Traverse this year, third lady and 17th overall. Very psyched to see you finish. It was really good.
Oh, psyched to see you too.
I mean, the obvious other non-stop race in the UK is Spine, and you've also finished over the Spine last year. So, what are the differences between the races? How did you find them? How do you find them compared? Find they compared?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say the biggest factor is that the Spine is in the winter, so you are battling the wintry conditions, the darkness, but Northern Traverse is meant to be in the spring with light and sunshine. But this year, that's what I was promised. But this year, I think actually the weather at Northern Traverse was worse than when I did the Spine going through Storm Kathleen. So your initial thought would be, well, the weather because it's in the winter, but probably the two of the biggest differences that I can think, and if people are thinking, either maybe which one should I do, or I've done Northern Traverse, can I do the Spine? Absolutely, definitely. The Spine kit is probably one of the biggest things, especially as a female. You're carrying I've never weighed mine because I was like, what's the point? I can't take anything out. You've got to have it. But it was probably about, like, depending on how much water and food I had, anything to like 7 to 9 kilograms worth of weight. So that is quite a lot to carry. And then the effort to then run. Whereas on the Northern Traverse, so it's a really good detailed mandatory kit. You could always run with that kit if there was the ability to run. And that is probably one of the other bigger factors, is that there is a lot of running on the Northern Traverse. There's the Spine, there is running, but it's quite like you get your short bits of running and then you hit the bogs or you hit the flagstones or you hit the weather, and you're in the darkness so much. Whereas in Northern Traverse, you do get a lot more light, and there are miles and miles worth of running. And in the Spine, you might find, well, if I ran all that way with that backpack on, I'd be done after 20 miles. Whereas in Northern Traverse, you're well fed and watered, and you get out of Richmond, you can run then for quite a few hours up towards Lordstown. So I found that a joy coming from the Spine. Almost that's the better way to do it, is like go Spine with all the kit and then release the kit and be like, oh, this is great, I can run. Obviously, as well, with the Spine, it being just that little bit longer, I think the degradation, is that the right word to say? Northern Traverse, as you know, Shane, people are starting to go downhill, but they haven't, as they really start that sort of second night, third night, which is what makes you like really super tired. You're really getting close to the finish. Whereas in the Spine, you're sort of like Alston, and they go, okay, see you in 60 miles. And by the way, there's nothing in between. You're on your own. So like the longer stretches when you're really tired, that Cheviot finish on the Spine is really hard. I couldn't compare them as in like which one is better, which one is harder. I would say they were both, you could make them both as hard as you wanted. They're both great races, but they are quite different. And I think the biggest thing is probably not the weather, not the time of year, not the darkness. It probably is the amount of kit on the Spine makes that a very different race to the Northern Traverse.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
Jay, so I'm going to ask both of you about your preparation. Perhaps Jay,
we were supposed to prepare.
No, not for this, for the event. So perhaps you could talk. I mean, again, one of the most common questions we are asked is, what training do I need to do? How many kilometers, how many miles a week do I need to run? Which of course is an impossible answer. You can't answer that question. But I think it's always nice to hear how people approach these races. So maybe, Jay, you could just talk us through your preparation for Cape Wrath and maybe how that differed from Dragon's Back, what you learned from 2023 and how that evolved for 24.
So, I mean, they were back-to-back races for me, effectively. I didn't do anything in between the two races. So I was relatively well trained up for Dragon's Back, and that was looking at sort of, it was 50 mile weeks, about 8,000 to 9,000 feet of elevation change, which is about all you can scrape out of a Cornish coast path. So it's quite difficult to kind of get that elevation. So, and that was nowhere near enough in my mind for a successful Dragon's Back. So that was one. So I came out of that relatively fit, and then had maybe a month off, and then to recover and just decide that I really liked running still, and then went off to I started to build up to sort of 50 mile weeks, 60 mile weeks, and then kept at 60 mile weeks for quite a while. Some life interruptions, as you always get, but I built some slack in the system. I wasn't panicked by that, but I needed to get that conditioning in my legs. So lots of long, easy miles, really easy miles, just going out on heart rate, full race kit. We had a really wet winter, obviously. So, of course, in preparation, having spoken to the Irish contingent of 2022 on Cape Wrath, I knew that I needed galoshes and oil skins and waders and wellies. Everyone told me wellies. And yeah, so I tested kit. That was really the twofold part of getting prepared for it. You see in lots of race forums, I think, lots of people asking for advice on, does this kit work or does that kit work? And really the only way you'll ever know is to test it in your training. You can stand in the shower in your waterproofs if you live in the desert and still test them if you're going to travel to a race like Cape Wrath or Dragon's Back. But you really need to use, the training is twofold. Yes, it's to build up the miles, but it's also to get comfortable with your kit. You need to, I'm sure, Eddie, you'll say, back me up on this, but you need to know with your pack on these long distance things where everything lives almost automatically, so you can reach for it. And sometimes just to know that it's not there, you're like, oh bugger, I've lost something, because there's a gap in your pack, and you're like, where's that gone? But yeah, lots of preparation in terms of mileage and conditioning and building time on feet and getting used to all that, but testing things over and over again. And if things don't work, try something else. But you need to kind of figure these things out in training. And I think a lot of people were asking questions quite close to the race, questions that I would have wanted answering myself months before the start line. So
how did you say that to them, Jay? Were you like, you should have asked this months before?
I just stood there laughing in their face to say, why have you failed so dramatically, you fool? No, I mean, you lend them your bit of kit, don't you? When you see them, you're like, I have my spare. But yeah, it's something I think people possibly don't do enough of in preparation, kit testing. And it's not always easy, but at least find out if the kit does what it's supposed to do for you, but find out yourself. Don't rely on other people telling you. You need to know on the start line that everything's going to work. There's enough stacked against you. Yeah. We spoke about, Shane, with luck and having to have that right amount of luck as well as everything else. The last thing you need is to try and figure out how to work your pole extension thing, or how do you fill a bladder against you, practice all this stuff. That's part of the preparation, not just the miles.
Excellent. Eddie, maybe we could ask you essentially the same question about your preparation for the Northern Traverse, and maybe those lessons you learned from the Spine that you could bring to the Northern Traverse the following year.
Well, my preparation for this race was a little bit different in that I was injured coming into the run-up of it. I had a bit of an injury at the start of the year, so I was kind of rebuilding the volume. But I think in some ways that played into my hands a little bit. Also, It's a very bad idea to do an April race when you live in the Alps. There's all the locals will tell me why the hell was I wearing my trainers when I should have my skis on my feet. And so my training was a little bit different in that I couldn't do a ton of running, but actually I was also blessed because we didn't have a ton of snow. So actually it was the best winter to train for a race because there wasn't, there was quite a few trails that were still clear of snow, so I could get a bit of running. I didn't do as much running as I perhaps wanted to. I'm a big believer in these massive races that fitness will get you through the first day, but it is your mental preparation, your kit preparation, and your strength that is going to carry you on from there. There is no point being in 3-hour marathon shape if you've, as Jay said, you're not sure about your kit, you don't pace it very well, and you go out really fast, and you've not done any strength work, so that when everything goes to pot, as it will do, as problems occur, if you are not strong and robust and have a good kit system, good nutrition system, backup ideas of when everything goes wrong, as it will do, then you can do all the run training that you want, but it will all go. You've got to have these super long races. You've got to be, just so robust and so strong. So that's what I did. And that's what I learned from the spine was actually pretty much the minute you climbed up Jacob's ladder on the spine, you're all by yourself. You've got this backpack. It's the strength that's going to carry you through these races. And so that's what I really focused on. I committed to doing 3 to 4 hours of strength work in the gym every single week. I was like non-negotiable. I went in, I lifted the heaviest weights I could. I did all sorts of cross training, and that, even though my Northern Traverse race had its problems and stuff, I would not have been able to finish that race and be running at the finish if I hadn't done the strength work. As I climbed out of Lordstone's checkpoint, my pole snapped. And no, it wasn't even at Lordstone's. It was, you cross the motorway, don't you? And then you start back up over the hills. So I got my poles out because I put them away for that because I'm running that bit. And I went to get my pole out and it just fell apart in my hands. So as you do when you're sleep deprived, I just looked at it and was like, someone, Shane, where are you? Come and mend this pole. Nothing I could do about it. And all I said to myself was, thank God I did that strength work, and I'm going to be able to run 100 miles with no poles through those bogs. It's not going to, mentally, this isn't going to phase me because I know that my legs are super strong. The other thing I worked on with the Northern Traverse was I knew that the first day was really hilly. Most of the climbing was going to be over the lakes. All the descending was going to be mainly over the lakes. And then we were going to hit the runnable section. So I mimicked that in training as well. I would do a long hiking up and down day, and then the next day on tired legs, carrying the full kit, I would go right, I'm going to run 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and I'm going to choose a run, and I'm going to make my poor tired legs run that whole way. And it was a really good way of measuring that effort of climbing on the first day, because you've got to be really careful that you don't get to shap with your quads blown, because it's just the start of the race. And then knowing that feeling of tired legs, knowing what that feels like, but knowing it won't get any worse. So you start off, you're like, oh, this is tiring, it's awful. But then as you get going, you feel a little better. And then you're like, actually, it didn't get any worse. If I can just get that ultra shuffle, tick along pace, practice my fueling, practice carrying my kit, it doesn't get any worse. And could I do that again tomorrow? So that was something that I really focused on Northern Traverse, probably more than the spine. I did so much hiking for the spine. For Northern Traverse, I really tried to condition the muscles and then mix up and make it as race specific as I could. And on that running day, I pictured myself at Richmond, coming out of Richmond. The curd was that is terrible, that road, it just goes on and on and on. But because I'd done that run about 6 times, I'd done that long run day on tired legs, I was like, actually, no, this isn't as bad as everybody makes out. So yeah, I would say make that, if you're thinking about how do I train for something like that, make it, if you can make it race specific, great for your muscles and conditioning, but also great for the mind. You can just constantly this is the bit that I'm practicing running, this is the bit where I'm going to be thinking this.
Yeah, well, I certainly think that mental preparation is so important, and I know for the for the big challenges that I've done, and some of the racing that I've done that's been important to me, that kind of mental rehearsal of running through literally everything that you can think that can go right and go wrong, and solving those problems in your head, and visualizing the successes. It's been really important to me personally. And kind of on that note, following on from that, again, I'm going to do a bit of compare and contrast here. So Jay, you came to Cape Wrath Ultra with two of your buddies, Stephen Cousins and James Forbes.
Loose descriptions, please. No. Acquaintances.
Well, I've listened to the podcast. There's definitely a lot of banter. And I was wondering how that compares maybe to Eddie's experience at Northern Traverse, which is very much more solo. You're out on your own and you don't have those touch points. And Jay, I'll let you explain in your own words, because there was clearly, a bit of a team morale support. Perhaps you could explain.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen and James is he's a Northern Traverse finisher. He's done a huge amount of outdoor stuff. He was crewing on Dragon's Back last year. He's been a good friend of mine for years, and Stephen similarly, very, very good runner. So I felt a little bit almost in some ways less au fait with it, but in terms of, well, maybe not au fait, but less what's the words I'm looking for? Basically, I felt that they were very good runners and I was in very strong company, I guess. Yeah. And then the camaraderie. So we as much as I tried to discourage him, Stephen insisted on sleeping in our tent with us. So he got a berth in, and James took him on under his wing, and we had a really nice tent group, a nice group, a very considerate group, good bunch of guys. Didn't see too much of them in camp, but saw everybody out on the course, obviously, and in the sleep pods at night. But yeah, it was nice to pick up from. It was nice to be able to come back in the evening and have a bit of a chat about what had gone on, for sure. And that helped. And also being able to help other people is a really nice experience as well. So when you can kind of listen to someone's day and how it's gone a bit rubbish and stuff, that's quite a, it's a download that some people need sometimes, isn't it? So that, yeah, it helped massively. I did Dragon's Back with Tris, and I mean, even though he was running the full thing, he was almost back before me some days anyway. How's that for? Yeah, we've all got those friends. So yeah, but being in the tent with Tris and on Dragon's Back, that was a lovely experience. Where else do you get to go running with your best pals for 6 to 8 days and all the rest of it, the travel there and the travel back? It's a real, it's a lovely experience, and we all bonded even more, I guess. We certainly, it was all supportive and all very, very pally. So yeah, it was a great experience. I loved it.
Brilliant. And Eddie, so I remember listening to your kind of post Northern Traverse podcast, and you talked a lot about the kind of mental challenges of being out there on your own and pushing on. And you don't, like, with, just for, let's not assume our listeners, watchers understand, but Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back are stages. So you run for the day and you stop overnight, and you have that opportunity to regroup and talk about the day and debrief and eat some food. Northern Traverse is non-stop. So you set off, even if you start with your friends, you separate out, and you scatter to the winds, literally to the winds this year. So Eddie, perhaps you could talk about your kind of much more solo experience then at Northern Traverse.
I think it's one of the biggest things, if you're thinking of doing one of these really big long races, is you've got to mentally prepare that whatever you see on social media, whatever you see on the videos, for 90 to 95% of the time, you are going to be on your own, and you need to find contentment in that. And I think that's such a good word to go, like, to use, like, you just need to be content in your own company and to be happy to be solo, for it to be a solo challenge. If you get a little bit of company, it's great. But I often find, and I think people will either resonate with this, or when they have a go at one of these super long events, once you're in it, you're almost happier to be out there by yourself. It is your adventure. Nobody however much, I know people do buddy up and they end up like running long sections together, but you've said this, Shane, in your briefing, it's very dangerous to become attached to somebody and them to become like your sort of little life buddy and stuff. You need to be, and as a woman, I'm always like, I don't want anyone seeing me running with a dot. I want to be, I'm out there for my kids. As a woman, we can do it. We can do this hard stuff. So I quite like the fact that I'm out there on my own, and I like to do the navigation myself, and I like to be managing myself. But it is quite a hard thing if you're stepping up to a longer distance, even from 100, because you will have very long, 12, 24 hours of time when you leave a checkpoint and you literally might not see a soul. I think having done the spine, it was very good preparation, because you leave checkpoints and you are much more in the middle of nowhere. You might not even cross a road for 12, 15, 16 hours. So I was kind of used to that solitude. So actually the Northern Traverse, it was quite like how much actually you go through villages and you see people, and you're like, oh gosh, life carries on your own. But I think you need, and it's a good part as we go back to the training, of getting used to doing no podcasts, no music, just being in your head and being content that you can, what's the dialogue like? What's that dialogue with my head? Because of these long races, you've got to be able to cope with all the voices and not let them exhaust or out talk you. But having said that, once you get into the race, and I think this is the same with Northern Traverse and the Spine, and one of the best tips I ever had, and this is ridiculous, is get 100 miles into the race before the race starts, and then it becomes a very different race. I know that sounds stupid because 100 miles is such a long way, but once you get into like over the first 24 hours, so I guess for most people in the Northern Traverse, like kind of like maybe 9 standards, that sort of Kirby Stephen, you start getting into checkpoints and seeing the same people. The same people might be leaving as you arrive, or the same people might be arriving as you leave, or you might sit for half an hour and have a cup of tea. And that little moment of sharing the horror of where you've been, and you can see, because it's the only time you identify with how you're feeling, everybody else is feeling, and you're like, oh, they're looking worse, and you're like, get in. Boys and men lying around, and you're like, guys, come on, let's go. And the other amazing thing, this happened at the Northern Traverse, is it Gladstone? Is that the name of the checkpoint? What's it called after Lordstones? The one just past
Glaisdale.
Glaisdale. Thanks, Charlotte.
I was in such a world of horror going towards Glaisdale. I don't know how long those miles are, but it was definitely about 300 miles between Lordstones and Glaisdale. And the checkpoint wasn't coming. And then, but the lovely lady had walked up the hill to come and meet me. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. So she's like, everybody gets to the checkpoint like this, Eddie. You're going to be okay. And as I came to the checkpoint, there were 2 like bog monsters who were just leaving. And I was so reassured that I was like, okay, so it's not just me crying and going, I can't do this. There are other people. And that moment was like so amazing that, okay, reassure, we all feel like this, we can turn it around. So you don't perhaps get the time on the trail with people as much, the people in the relationship you have with like the wonderful volunteers at the checkpoint, or the people that you see, those are the bits that you kind of like take to your heart and remember, just those little chats, or just that feeling, or even just the look of like, whoa, we're doing this, but we're in this together. That's amazing.
I mean, Jay, you're fresh back from Cape Wrath Ultra. Perhaps you could kind of reflect not necessarily on the running, but the everything else experience of the event, because Eddie's just touched on it. Those kind of relationships with the volunteers, the relationships with your buddies that you make. I personally, I think this is one of the most important experiences that you want to come away from an event with, a really positive, experience of meeting new people and shared camaraderie and community. How was that? Did that work for you at Cape Wrath? Please say yes.
The check's in the post, right? Yeah, it absolutely. I mean, from the minute we arrived at Fort William, we had people coming over and saying hello, and people that we knew and people that we didn't know. So you were kind of bedding into the race, the bubble, from the first minute. And there's a little bit of sizing up, I think, goes on in pre-race where you're kind of looking around, and I was definitely thinking, shit, everybody here looks like they're pretty good. So, am I at my depth? So, and then you start to, and I don't know about you, Eddie, you kind of, you sometimes, I think we all do this probably, you make, before you know someone, you kind of make up a little backstory for them. Like,
oh, yes, definitely. Story, name, where they're from.
Yeah.
Or character assassination.
Yep. There's long-legged fast guy, you know.
Red Solomon pack, bit pushy. Don't go near him.
Yes, red
Catch
hat.
you later. She's fast. Nice leggings. Must ask her where they're from.
Orange t-shirt, different color hair. It's just all these little kind of characters that you have around. And then, of course, slowly during the week, you may or may not get to know them better. And it may completely flip your expectations of them on the head. Or there may still be a character in my mind that I know nothing about, and they have that mystique of, long-legged striding person, or short jumping in and out of the river person. You know, there's so many people that I met, and so many people. I was thinking about this the other day. There's still so many people that I see in the pictures of Cape Wrath that I never got to speak to, and yet I felt like I couldn't turn around without having a chat with somebody in camp. There were still so many. Maybe we need a 14-day version, but yeah, you can kind of, maybe not, but you get to meet. Also, I chatted with Ramesh the other day from Canada. We were chatting on WhatsApp in the middle of the afternoon on Tuesday about this and that. So yeah, you have this wonderful experience in camp, and then you've got all the volunteers. And you start to see those guys, and that you understand their personalities, and the catering staff. I love the catering staff. They were just, it's a real nice bit of familiarity to go in there and see the same faces every day. And I loved that they couldn't remember what I wanted to eat each day, because I'm a picky vegan, obviously, and I go in and they were like, oh yeah, it was just, the whole thing is just so. Familiar, but in a family, in the word of family way, you know, it feels like everybody's rooting for you, everybody's got your back. It's lovely, it's absolutely lovely. And just seeing people out on the course, you know, seeing the checkpoint staff,
it is a lovely experience. And I think it's you know, I like to think we do a good job at our events, but actually it's a wider thing across the entire community of trail running. I think we do very well compared to some other sports potentially. I mean, Eddie, how about you? Maybe your experience? I mean, maybe to ask you about racing in France. I mean, what's the sense of community? France, Italy? No,
it's very, very different. There isn't. I think mainly because all the longer stuff I've done in England, and so all the trail races I've done in France have been absolutely horrendous. 30, 40 Ks where I'm breathing out fast, and so there's no chat. There is, I think they tend, I'm not going to diss the French, but it is a lot, there's a lot more when you're racing, and I think this is also because I've done like the short, like 40K, 50K, 60K, they're hard, we're running quite hard, and so the chat isn't there. The community is quite different. I tell you what the French do very well is that they love their trail races in all the villages, and holds, and if you do like a really big race where perhaps you're starting in the night or going through the night, there'll be like kids, I'm like, these kids are up at like 2,500 meters with bonfires, and they're you can hear the bells, you can see the head torches go. Every village is like, they're all up, they all love it. There's not that like kind of sense that which sometimes you can get in trail races in England, where people are a little bit peeved that you're out running through the village.
There's an email going to the parish council when you run through an English village.
They're not, or you know, they're driving and they're like, oh my god, another one of these runners, and you think, oh god, I know there's like 500 behind me. They tend to get really behind. I think it's the sort of community thing, probably also where I live, is that there's a real sense of community. They're really proud of like their villages, and they want, as you come through, you know, they want to showcase that. You see that on the Tour de France, don't you, that they absolutely love it. And I think also probably they kind of get that like mountain, you know, to them they've been like going up and down these mountains since they were like literally out the womb, and then they're taken up on their skis and stuff. So it's quite normal for like the kids to be up there at 2 o'clock in the morning ringing the cowbells and stuff like that. I would go back though to say, like, I think I said about the Northern Traverse that I made it sound like it was quite a lonely experience, but I would say the 3 or 4 guys, I didn't actually see any other women on the whole race, but the 3 or 4 guys that I kind of, couple I finished with, couple I ran a bit of the start with, we are now friends for life. You know, we have each other's numbers, we check in, there's a bond. And Jay, you probably have the same. When you've been through something like that with people, they don't know, man, as we always say. You don't know, man, you weren't there, you don't know what it was like. So though I say that there's a massive amount of time you do spend on the moments you share with those people on the trails, like that's the kind of like they're lifers then. Those guys are friends that you kind of think, yeah, I'll stick with you forever now. So I think that's something that you've created, Shane, in your events as well. So
oh, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
And I know exactly what you mean, because I've had that experience of, you know, getting to know, it's almost by random chance, but you get to know a particular participant or event team member better than another, and that feeds into going running together, and suddenly you're building these lifelong friendships. And it is amazing how, I guess, the medium of trail running can touch your life so profoundly, and that is fantastic when that happens. Okay, I'm going to change gear and ask about kit because the questions that we are always asked about as how many miles do you run? How many miles do you have to run? We've covered kind of the training a little bit, and what shoes should I wear? And actually, Charlotte, perhaps you could jump to Ralph's question, and we could ask Jay, and then take the same question to.
I just about to say there's a question. What shoes would you recommend for the Dragon's Back race, especially the rocky sections? Wondering if usual trail running shoes are sufficient, or if lightweight hiking boots with stiffer soles would be better.
Oh, trail running shoes, without doubt. Don't. You won't cover the ground you need to. Is this specifically for Dragon's Back?
It was, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
specific.
You won't cover the terrain you need to in hiking shoes. If you're able to move over that terrain in hiking shoes, you're going too slow. You really have to shift. So absolutely, trail running shoes. Something a little bit stiffer, more supportive for the first 2 days, possibly, and then something a little bit comfier for the rest of the race. That would be my advice. That was the advice somebody gave me, and it was good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe add something to that. I've been on the Dragon's Back route a lot recently in the last few months, and Scarpa are the sponsors, full disclosure here, but I've been running in the Scarpa Spin Ultras, and I feel like if you were to choose one shoe that can do it all, that's as good as anything else. I mean, to be honest, there's lots of great shoes out there, but I've done hundreds and hundreds of kilometers in those shoes across all of the Dragon's Back, and they seem like a good shoe. So there's my top tip. And maybe going back to a more general question, and we'll go kind of order Jay, Eddie in that order again. But Jay, just in terms of kit reflection, you've got a huge bank of experience, Dragon's Back into Cape Wrath. What do you take away from that? What would you change if you were going back to Dragon's Back? Is there anything you'd change?
Legs. Dragon's Back. No, I got the kit for Dragon's Back. Spot on. Okay. It was. I've done a lot of races in the heat. I was lamenting this on the first few days of Cape Wrath this year. This is my 5th race that had started in a heat wave, going up to sort of 37 degrees on some of them. So, yeah, I've got my hot race kit dialed in. I've practiced all winter with wet race kit again, so that was all dialed in as well. Cape Wrath, Dragon's Back kit. Would I change anything? I probably, the big problem is because we have the Autoleb bags, the torpedo bags. I don't know how I do this. I try to fold space and time and mess with physics and maths to get stuff in there that won't go in. I just seem to take too much kit still. Maybe the best answer there is to try and slim your kit down. You don't need. I didn't need. So I got used to running in wet kit in preparation for a wet Cape Wrath Ultra. I was washing my kit, but putting it on wet the next morning to go out and do my back-to-back runs. get used to being uncomfortable. So you, with your kit, don't look for luxury, because that's like the start line. You know, after that,
the line of the race.
don't look for luxury. No comfort, no luxury. Get used to it being horrid. But yeah, you've got to get yourself used to being uncomfortable. So when you're going out when you've got your equipment, yeah, it's great if it's just come off the washing line or out of the tumble dryer and it's all clean. But what do those running shoes look like when they're covered in cack? Or, you know, how do they feel when they're covered in, or your backpack when it's salty and it's wet, and you know, do the zips still work? And there's lots of bits where you kind of have to check your kit works in the real world. Even things like, you know, putting your race number and your poles and getting used to doing all that stuff. So in terms of kit, Dragon's Back, I think I got right, especially for those hot conditions. I use a top that's specifically, can we mention brands?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I use, I was looking at doing a race out in Oman a few years ago. I did a race out in Oman, and obviously Middle East, quite hot. And I wondered what people wore in hot conditions, and I think this is a good way to do it. If you've got a race and it's some specific kind of weather, maybe look at a country that has similar weather and look at what the running brands in that country are and what they sell. So I use a brand of socks called Stegen quite a lot, and they're Australian socks, great for hot weather conditions, because if you're running in Australia, that's what you're dealing with generally. So that kind of contextuality in choosing kit, and I use a white Raidlight Marathon Disabler top for my hot running. I've got two, and they're featherlight. They're 50 SPF. They come up to your kind of high neck. They cover everything down to your knuckles, and they're long and they're lightweight, and they have a deep zip, and they even have a space for your watch to poke through on the wrist. So you can kind of do it, you know, you can use it in all. So that's that. I have a bandana, I have a bucket hat, I have all this stuff kind of. Similarly, it's all tried and tested. So Kate Rath, I know one of our questions was what was the most important piece of kit, and I've thought really hard on that.
Okay.
And so it is a bit of a, okay, so for me, and anyone that saw a picture of my feet after the race, which were immaculate, although one foot was twice the size of the other foot, the quality of the skin was still perfect. Trench, without a doubt. And I know that sounds like I'm plugging James, but I put trench on in the evening before I put my fresh socks on to climb into bed with fresh underwear, into my 4-poster each evening with heated blanket. I put my fresh underwear on. So I put my trench underneath my socks, on my feet, sorry, then put my socks on. And then in the morning, I'd get up and put trench back on my feet and then put my socks back on. And that was me done. That was the only foot care I did in the race.
So for people who don't know, trench is like a barrier cream you can apply to your feet to, I guess, prevent the moisture kind of really impregnating the skin. And I've used it as well. It does, it does seem to be very good. And actually, jumping into Northern Traverse, I had the pleasure of sorting some of Eddie's feet out at the end. And you were very tired, but I actually asked everybody who finished and I spoke to, and certainly everyone whose feet I looked at, was what they had done in terms of foot preparation, and were they wearing waterproof socks or were they not? Did they moisturize their feet or not? And I was trying to look for a correlation in terms of good feet and bad feet. And I'll hold my answer, my very anecdotal answer. But Eddie, how about your kind of kit experiences from Northern Traverse?
Okay, so obviously we were thrown the storm this year at Northern Traverse. In previous years, the way I was sold this race was like a heat wave. And so the kit, obviously, you need to be adaptable. You need to be prepared that you could be in Storm Kathleen or you could be in a heat wave. So there's a huge difference in the kind of kit that you're going to need. The biggest thing, probably the best thing that I had was a really good waterproof jacket. I threw money at this, and I actually had 2 waterproof jackets with me as well. I know this is an expensive outlay, but I also think you're going to spend so many hours training for a race, paying your race entry, but hours into this, like invest in good kit, practice layering it together to know that it works. And I knew that one thing I needed to do in Northern Traverse with that weather, in that first, especially the weather window in the first 24 hours, was keep myself dry and warm. Otherwise I wasn't even going to leave Patterdale. I was, because Shane was like, see you at the end, I'm going. I was like, oh, I am actually going to have to get to the end. But are really good, and they are expensive, but they're a lifetime investment if you look after it. A really good waterproof jacket. Look at hoods, look at wrists. If you're a female, look at the way that it's cut, look at how it's going to fit with your pack. And if you can, 2 jackets, and I just wear my older waterproof lighter jacket underneath the big one, because if you are in a storm, if you're out for 24 hours, you are going to start to get wet through, because all you need is to have your hood open for a minute and the water to get inside and you're wet inside. So I think thinking about your layering and the potential of having 2 jackets, but the most important thing, having a really good jacket that I love the process as well. You feel safe. Like Storm Kathleen, I was good for her because I had this jacket and I knew that I was going to be inside that jacket. I think if you feel warm, your brain allows you to like go up those hills and be in those conditions, because your brain's not panicking. It's like, I'm warm, I'm well fed, I can cope with that. So I would say, if you're thinking about especially in England now when the weather is so variable, really think about your jacket. One of the big things as well, as Jay touched on it, and this is such great advice, is that you are going to get wet, you're going to get cold, and the Northern Traverse checkpoints, in the spine, as you go in, you hand your socks to them, you hand your gloves to lovely volunteers. You're probably at the checkpoints for longer as well. And you can dry gloves, you can dry socks. Sometimes they even dry your trainers a little bit. These are probably secrets they don't want you to know because they want it. But Northern Traverse is much harder because there's nowhere to dry anything in checkpoints. You're not going to be able to dry gloves. You've got this drop bag, but you can't take you only see your drop bag so many times. You have to be prepared. Once your gloves get wet, you're going to be putting on wet gloves again, and you just got to put them on. You're going to be all right. The minute you get moving, you're going to get warm again. But there's no point putting loads of dry stuff on because you're going to get wet again. So yes, have change of kits, but you don't need endless change of kits, because as long as you're warm, you are going to get wet, and you just need to get used to that feeling of being wet, leaving a checkpoint, but you'll get warm again once you get going. Another good tip I had that I did as at Richmond, where it's the only place I stopped to sleep, was I put my kit into my sleeping bag. And so that it was damp, but it definitely dried it out and it warmed it up a little bit, so that when I went to go and put my base layer back on again, even though it was still a bit damp, it had definitely dried out a bit. As for my feet, Shane, 2 hours he spent on my feet, and I didn't put anything on them, and they were pretty ruined. If I did it again, I would why I didn't put trench cream on, I don't know, but I reckon those conditions anyway, that most people's feet were macerated at the end anyway. And I did wear waterproof socks for some sections of it, but I find with waterproof socks on the spine, they were great because you're hiking so much. But I find for running in waterproof socks, especially descending, I find the rub of that, because it's a sort of like a liner, your foot slips slightly in it. So I actually find it better to wear running socks. And had I applied the trench foot cream, I preferred that for the Northern Traverse over the spine, because there's so much more running.
Interesting. So the anecdotal experience or feedback I got was it didn't seem to make any difference, the people wearing waterproof socks or not. But the one thing that came out was people who were moisturizing their feet. That is, so the ones that had spent the weeks before, even months before, really looking after their feet, and they'd done the pedicure and they'd filed off the kind of hard bits of skin, the calluses, and they'd moisturized, that those seem to be the people with the least bad feet at the end of the race. But that's not particularly scientific, but we will maybe one day do it a bit more scientifically. I'm going to kind of change gear again. I think the triad of questions we're asked about is the training, is the kit, and then the final one is the nutrition. We are always asked, what would you recommend? What works? I think nutrition is a very deeply personal thing. It's very obvious that what works for one person does not work for all. When you're talking about your nutrition kind of experience, it's an N1 test, isn't it? So I'm just going to ask maybe Jay first again. That seems to be the order we're in, and it kind of just worked out that way. But perhaps you could just talk about how you have approached your nutrition and any insights you'd like to share.
So I would say, obviously, test your nutrition in various races if you can before, and train on the food that you're planning to use. Get used to it. Get used to how it affects you. It's another thing to make it as race-like as possible in your training. So I would go out and consume the same amount of food in the hours I was out training as I was planning to do on the race. Did it feel too much? Did it make me feel too bloated? All that food's got to go somewhere. Did I have to stop on a run to go to the loo? Was I eating too much bulky food? So for me, I went into Cape Wrath with pretty much the same mix of food that I'd taken to Dragon's Back. So one of the most important things as well, by the way, if you're doing these multi-day races, the type that I've done, bag up all your food for each day individually. Put it in Ziploc bags, write it on there, make it idiot proof. We found out on Dragon's Back that people descend into the cognitive range of a 3-year-old after day 2. So plan it all before. Don't try and figure out what's going on during the race. It will be a fail. So I had 6 bags on Dragon's Back, 8 bags on Cape Wrath. I came back with food from both of them, but I would much prefer to bring food back than to run out on the race. Now, the breakfast and the food in camp is fantastic. It's all calorific. So that's going to kind of get you through to mid-morning lunchtime. And then depending on how long you're planning to be out, best case scenario, but also for a weight perspective, but then worst case scenario in case shit goes wrong. You need to plan for I would say the worst day, or maybe a medium of the two. And you need to have some options. So I ran with a few bits of Morton's on Cape Wrath Ultra and Dragon's Back. I ran with some caffeine fruit bars, which were great, 200 calories per 100 grams or something like that. So calorific food. And then I discovered really good kind of fruit and nut trail mix is super calorific, like 1,000 calories per 250 grams. So lots of bang for your buck. And it's great textures as well. You know, and you want something a bit juicy, and then you want something a bit nutty, a bit firmer. You've got a lot because sometimes it's just about forcing in what will go in, whatever, you know, and the most palatable thing you have. If that's also your most calorific, that was a bonus for me. But so a mixture of different foods, test them, get comfortable with them, possibly overdo the food rather than underdo the food. My race slowed down on Cape Wrath Ultra. I was slowing down through the week. It was just that natural fatigue. So of course, I kind of planned for the best case scenario. I had the same calorific level of food all the way through from day 1 to day 8. Clearly, I was thinking about screaming across the line in record time on day 8. And of course, I was going much slower. So I was eating less food. So I came back and I noticed that by about day 3, each of my day bags of food it had remnants in it the next day. When I was packing the next one, I could see I wasn't getting through enough food, but I didn't feel hungry. So yeah, I would say bed your food in, have some choices for when your stomach decides it doesn't want that thing that's been rock solid for years. That will happen. Also, if you throw up, get used to it. You know, don't be shocked if you throw up. You can keep going. I had a horrible day on day 3. I started throwing up at lunchtime. Felt queasy about 11 o'clock, started throwing up at lunchtime. 4 hours, I couldn't get any food in. Tried also, it was getting really expensive throwing Morton's back up, so I binned that. And I went on to, in the end, it was salt tablets and water. And salt tablets and water got me through to a 14-hour day. They got me through half of a 14-hour day. So don't be shocked if you can't get it's not the end of the world. Keep going. You've got lots of stored calories on board. You'll make it through. Don't throw the towel in because you start puking. It's kind of part of ultra running.
Maybe that's a good moment to jump to Eddie, because I know you're an expert in this area.
I don't think it's an area you want to be an expert in. Yeah, I suffer terribly with, and everybody, if you're in this camp, the nausea and the vomiting, and it's a very, very hard thing to deal with on a very long race, being calorie deficient from the start, because it affects that first bit of the race, and then that's the last thing you want to be when you know. I mean, it's terrifying when you're being sick after 40, 50 miles, you can't keep anything down, you're in a named storm and you've still got 150 miles to go. But as Jay said, you can rally, and I don't think that it's anything that I've done wrong. I think it's definitely something that I can solve. And I would say that if you are sick, the checkpoint medics are incredible, and don't be scared to go and talk to them when you get to a checkpoint. I learned that in the spine. I tried to hide the fact that I was being so sick because I thought they won't let me back out. Oh my God, and they heard me being sick and they were like, we can sort you out, but you need to listen to us. So if you are sick, and I think in these long races it's super common, tell the medics they can help you. They can help you with medication, and the checkpoint staff can look after you and sort you out. You just need to sort yourself out. For nutrition for these super long races, very different to anything. You can't compare it to any other kind of ultra, because it's not a case of, right, I'm going to take 60 grams of carbs an hour, I'm going to take 90 grams of carbs an hour. You're just not going to be able to do that, because your body turns into a complete, you won't recognize what you can do with actually not a ton of fuel. And I think almost the body switches into like this caveman woman mentality. And the longer you go, you realize, like, actually my body is now switched. It knows what it's doing. And I'm going into checkpoints and I'm fueling really well. And actually I'm almost better, like very little, but often, rather than like if you are used to doing like maybe 50Ks, 50 miles, you'd be like every half an hour I'm going to have a gel. But that is so much for your system and your digestive system to tolerate over this time. So I think you need to almost look at, for these long races and practice in training, but this is also very hard to practice in training. This is almost something that you need to learn on the job, is that going quite a long way without fuel isn't something that you don't need to be drip feeding like every half an hour. You might find that actually having a sandwich, stopping, there might be like a co-op that's open, or you might have a sandwich with you. Having that, you can actually go for a couple of hours then, maybe just sipping on a bit of drink. The fueling is very, I think if you fuel it a little bit more like you would your day, so you kind of like, you go into the checkpoint, you might have your dinner or your breakfast, and then you might go quite a few hours, and then you have your next meal. It's not the same. I would definitely recommend not using sports nutrition really at all on these super long races, but trying to use solid fuel. Your gut knows it's got a job. It's digesting something. It's got different tastes, different flavors. Mix up really a smorgasbord of as many different things. So my go-to for these long races, especially once you get into that, I always break them down into like first day, second day, third day. Like first day, you can probably slam down. You can be like, I'm just going to running a little bit quicker. I'm going to take some gels. I'm going to have some gel shots. I'm going to move through the checkpoint, just grab a piece of pizza, have a cup of tea, take out a sandwich, and off I go. Day two, there's no way I'm not going near that sports nutrition. I'm going to take my time at the checkpoints. Day three, you're going to be like, I'm going to actually sit at this checkpoint. I'm going to eat 4 bowls of that delicious lasagna. Then I'm going to ask for some rice pudding, and then I'm going to have some soup. That fueling is very different. The only way really you can train for this, and I did do this when I did the spine, is to go and do a long run, come home, eat a big meal, and go out and run again. And you can do that. And feeling running on, like, when you're full, you can do it, even though it's uncomfortable, but getting used to that, like, oh, it's such a big deal, and I'm now getting used to that. But because the intensity is so low, it's very easy to digest that food. So though, if you're used to doing those shorter races, you think there's no way. It is actually quite easy to run when you've got a full stomach. The other thing with the fueling is you can arrive at checkpoints absolutely destroyed, no fuel, you might not have drunk for hours. And this happens on like the Spine or Northern Traverse. Like if you're in a storm, you can't actually get to food because you're trying not to be blown off the mountain. You can't actually drink. Don't be frightened of it, because you get to the checkpoint. You might arrive at the checkpoint a lot more dehydrated and hungry than you ever have been, but you can, with the help of the volunteers, and they're all super experienced. They're not scared by these people coming in. They're not like going to be like, you're out the race. So this is how they see everybody. You can get into that checkpoint, and within 15 minutes, you can refuel and turn the race around as well. So I think the nutrition is so different to how you would fuel anything else. And the only thing I can say is like practice. Oh yeah, my super tip for the last 50 miles or so, the last day 3, day 4, day 5, whatever you're doing, keep it simple. Your hands, everything might be like tendon. You can't open packets anymore. Your inability to like swallow, you might have ulcers. I'm selling this, like really swollen tongue. Baby Bell in one pocket, chocolate minstrels in the other.
Nice.
But neither, you just need a little bit of moisture. You've got heavy calories. You go for a little smudge board of Baby Bell, cheese, nice savory, pudding of a minstrel, repeat until you see Shane in the coast.
That's wonderful. I'm going to do a bit of a shout out. We've got a couple of unanswered questions which we're going to come to. But if you have any questions for any of us this evening, I'd like to have a bit of a Q&A as we start to wrap up. But before we go to questions, so if you have a question, now is the time to drop it into the Q&A section, and we'll come to Ellen. Sorry, Charlotte.
Trails podcast listeners, this is the PG event. Sorry,
I missed that. It cut out at my end.
Keep it clean, please, Tea and Trail podcast listeners.
Yes. Anyhow, if we get some questions, that'd be great. Charlotte will ask those in a moment. But I was going to ask Jay and Eddie just about how the feeling at the end of Cape Wrath and Northern Traverse, because that's the moment that is going to stay with you, isn't it? The few kilometers before the end, the crossing the finishing line, the reflections afterwards. Just maybe, Jay, can you just sum up where you were, how it all felt at the end of Cape Wrath?
Whoa. Yeah, I had a really torturous last 2 days on the course because of an overuse thing in my leg. So my leg was swelling up, it wouldn't go downhill. So crossing that finish line was just this huge sense of relief, partly because the physical pain was ending, and it was like, well, I thought it was. It went on for days afterwards. But yeah, in my mind, it's like, woo, no more pain. But just crossing that getting to the lighthouse, it was just, I mean, this is the contrast between Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath as well. In Cape Wrath, you're running away from humanity. You're going to this remote location in the top corner. Dragon's Back, you're running towards Cardiff. So you have these two opposing things of coming into humanity and then arriving at the Cape Wrath Lighthouse, knowing that there's nothing else there other than a lighthouse, some seagulls, various other wildlife bits and bobs, and the race people, the race organization. So crossing the line was huge relief for so many reasons. And this has come to me in the last probably week or so, actually, just almost an epiphany in a way. But finishing Cape Wrath is the first time in many years where I've been self-satisfied at the result. That kind of, lots of people will give you plaudits and stuff for finishing races, and we all do, and it's a really nice thing. But I felt self-satisfied with Cape Wrath. It felt like a huge challenge was over, and I'd done all right. And that a personal feeling of satisfaction. So yeah, beyond anything else, it was a huge wow, just so many challenges in the week, roller coaster of, you're almost over something, and then another smack in the face with a custard pie, and just kept coming. It was like and just to keep going through all of that stuff, and have fun with it. That was the main thing. It was so tough. Eddie, mine and your races, we sat. I mean, I'm not sure I'm ever going to do the Traverse now, but it's I think mine sounded like I had a party. Yeah, it was great. We sent out for pizza. It was awesome. Yeah, it was. But I had so much fun on it, and then you get that moment when you cross and you realize. I saw this on one of the Dragon's Back videos that I watched, and a lady stood on the last hill before Cardiff, and she said she shed a tear because, I think I'm paraphrasing, but she basically shed a tear because it was going to be over soon. And there was a little bit of that as we came up to the Cape Wrath Lighthouse. It was almost like, oh God, this is going to be done soon. And you know, I'd savor it all through it. But coming to the end of the race, there was definitely a little bit of a, you know, it's we've been playing hooky for a week and running through work days and stuff like that. And yeah, it was such a, it was a very different thing. Much happiness and joyness and relief and everything else, and also a little bit of a sadness that it was coming to an end and it would soon be done and back to reality. So yeah, those are probably my biggest emotions.
So Eddie, how was it running into Robin Hood's Bay?
Well, you'll probably remember, Shane, because you probably have a picture of me finishing by your bed, but we hadn't had any sunshine, and as I finished the last 6K, I saw Charlotte, wonderful Charlotte, near just before that final coast section, and the sun came out, and it was the most beautiful morning, and I ran along that, and the feeling of it was such a feeling of contentment, because you've been out there for a day, you've been on your own, we battled through that storm, we battled through the bogs, and the sun, the seagulls, the warmth, the sound of the sea. I will never forget that feeling of like total like peace, contentment. And because until these mega races, until you're within touching distance of the finish, there's no guarantee, Shane, I'm sure you've experienced it, there's no guarantee you're going to finish. You could be 3 miles from the finish and something could break, something could snap. You have to keep yourself laser mentally so strong. You can't think about the finish. And I think especially if you're a parent or you've got an emotional attachment to the race, I have to keep myself like totally in check through that whole race. If I think too much about what's going on, my kids or life, I have to keep myself like, absolutely, this is my job. I'm doing this race. I'm not going to let any emotion in, because if it comes in, I'm gonna press this button on my tracker and I'm gonna call it. So that those last few kilometers where you could, the relief, I won't lie, there was quite a few tears, and I was running with a couple of guys and they were like, of course. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to let you go, and I'm just going to wander along this little bit and just have a moment and take a breath and just thank my body for getting me here, and everybody that's helped me, and just breathe and just be, I've done it. Such a feeling. And then of course you run down. I don't know if there's a better finish line, because as well in Northern Traverse, you pick that stone up from St. Bede's, and you've carried that little stone all the way, and you've gone to the other side of the country on your own feet, and you run down, and actually you don't see the end. You go down into town and you like wiggle down a terribly steep hill, you get back in and you've ve this little stone that you're going to put back in. This such a magical moment, and the finish line, you're greeted like you're a celebrity and you've done much better than you have. But that feeling of like coming towards what you know is going to be love and people, and putting that stone back into the sea, that is, I don't think there's another race that you could create that, like that magic moment of that. And Shane was like, I couldn't find the stone out my pack. He's like, why does everybody choose the smallest stone possible? So if you are going to do it, don't choose one that's about that small that you think it could. I actually pulled a minstrel out, and I was like, I'm just going to return to Shane. I did find the stone. That is such a magical moment of the Northern Traverse, and it's a really good thing to focus on when you're in the sort of dregs of it. It's like, I am carrying my little stone, and I had my little stone had the initials of the kids on, and I was carrying that, and there was no way. God, imagine if I'd gone home and I brought the stone back, guys, didn't make it. There's no way I wasn't going to put that little stone. So that moment with Shane at the finish and the sun, and then the terrible walk up the steep hill back to the finish, and then that moment of sitting in the checkpoint, and the, like, as Jay said, that relief of like, oh my gosh, I'm done. I have done that. And they're so lovely. The tea, it makes it all worthwhile. And so, yeah, I'll never forget that sound of the sea and that feeling. And it makes probably Jay as well, when we have to retell these stories on the podcast, every time I feel that emotion of it and having to keep a hold of it. So
absolutely,
yeah, if you need a bit of inspiration, need a bit of like training, or thinking about that feeling at the finish. Once you've had it once, it's addictive. You're going to want it again and again.
I certainly know there's that kind of bubbling emotion, and I make a real effort to see as many finishers on all the events as I can. And I don't see them all. It's just not possible. I have to sleep as well. Northern Traverse in particular, it's very hard to see lots of people because it's 24 hours a day for 3 days that you have finishers coming in. Dragon's Back, end of day 6, I'll see most of the participants cross the finish line, and I'm always surprised when I start to experience that emotion, and it sometimes really catches me by surprise. And it's it just be a little something that you've made a little connection with somebody, and sometimes they don't even know. You might have seen them struggling on the dot and thinking, I'm not sure they're going to make the cut off, and you kind of make a little mental note of their race number and name, and then days later you see them come across the line, and it's magical as a race organizer as well. So Charlotte, would you like to run through some questions? I'm not sure what we've got.
We've got a few questions. Some, I don't know if I've gone through these. One for Eddie. What piece of kit did you wish you had but didn't think about? And what piece of kit was a waste of time?
Oh God, that'd be bad, wouldn't it? Waste of time.
Yeah, did you carry anything for the whole way, and then you got to the end and thought, I did not need this?
Need any of that? I probably no. I think everybody should be like this. By the time you get to the start of that race, everything in your pack you are going to use and has a purpose. I guess if it hadn't been as wet, I wouldn't have got all the waterproofs out. But the kit list is really good for Northern Traverse. You will need all those kits. Probably my best bit, I know Shane, we talked about this as well, is that even though the weather actually in the last like 12 hours, I remember that rain actually, last 5 hours was really nice. By the end of the race, I was wearing 5 layers, even though it was quite a bright, sunny morning when I finished. Don't underestimate how many clothes on that day 3 that you're going to be wearing. And the biggest change I made from the Spine to the Northern Traverse was that my mid layer was a really good, it was the new Montaigne Fireball, I think it's called. Is that right? That is an incredible bit of kit. It's got an amazing hood that you can just put up if you don't want to have a hat on or the weather comes in. It's really super warm. It's slightly splash proof. So again, if you're just like in a light shower, you don't want to put a waterproof on, it's going to keep you warm. But as a mid layer as well, it's really great bit of kit. So I would say again, it's an expensive purchase, but if you look after it, it's the sort of thing that you're going to wear. So I made that investment between the Spine and Northern Traverse, and I wouldn't do a big race without it. And I used every single bit of kit that I had in my backpack that was mandatory kit because of the weather that we had. I don't think I had anything in my backpack when I finished. I literally had on everything. Probably maybe. Oh yeah, I lost one of my gloves. So but I literally had everything that I was meant to have. And I think pretty much most people did by the end of the race had most of their kit on. So I don't think there's anything that I would leave behind. Yeah.
A question for both of you. Would you rather train in hot or cold conditions? If you had to choose.
Jay, do you want to go first?
That's a difficult one because you kind of want it to be contextual, don't you, for the race that you're doing as much as possible. But I would say if I had to choose, I would say cold is easier to train in. because you can always add layers and warm up if you need to. Whereas nobody wants to see me running half naked through Cornwall.
That's where we did Jay. I'm all about naked running.
The less layers, the better.
And that's why you've moved to France, though. Cornwall ain't about that. So yeah, I would say cold makes things easier because you can always add layers and take layers off, whereas you can only moderate your temperatures so much. If you're not used to hot running, or if you don't enjoy it, there's no escape. So yeah, I would say cold probably makes life a little bit easier.
Okay.
I'd like an extreme of either, like super cold, love that, -20, wind is 50, I'm all over that, really enjoy that. Super hot, crop top, cycling shorts, throwing water over, I'm all about that. Damp, cold, light drizzle, nah, you're all right. No. I like the extreme of either.
There's a question about for Eddie and Shane. What part of the Northern Traverse route would you recommend for recceing in October, particularly?
Eddie, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about doing the Northern Traverse, signed up for the Northern Traverse, the best way you can spend your training time is to recce the course. Knowledge is power, and when you are very tired, knowing some of that course is invaluable. I did a 4-day recce in maybe March. It was about 6 weeks, but no, end of February it was. I did 4 days of the course. I can share what I did if people want to know about that. But definitely, I wouldn't worry about the first 20K to Ennerdale. Super easy. You're going to be surrounded by people, easy running. I didn't actually recce anything up to Borrowdale to the first checkpoint, and I was totally fine. There were lots of people. You start seeing the lakes traverse people. There's lots of people on the course. There's lots of people out, daylight. There's nothing that's going to really phase you. It might be nice to know, but it's not necessary. I definitely do the lakes section just to know the climbs, know the descents. The Kidsty Pike bit, there's a little bit at the top, which is a little bit tricky, the descent, knowing the line off that, especially if you're going to do it in the dark. The next section is good to know as well, because it's hard going and it's quite long to Shap, and then it's a long way to Kirby Stephen as well. And I think just knowing what's coming is a great is a great tool when you're really tired. And I didn't recce the last section, and I wish I had, and I think everybody said that from the last checkpoint to the end, it's unrelenting. There's hills, there's bogs, and it's sort of featureless in some ways, and so it's very hard to gauge how far you are, and you feel I remember oh, okay, 10K to go. I'm there in an hour. And then I'd be half an hour later, it'd be 9.4K. I'd be like, what the hell? It's quite slow going, and I wish I'd known that bit. Yeah. Any other bits of the route, I would definitely recce. The only other bit I'd say you don't need to do is from Richmond to the motorway, because again, that is a super easy. You're basically going in a pretty straight line. It is pretty monotonous. I don't think you need to do that twice either. But if you check out my Strava, you can see the bits that I recce'd as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't need to add anything to that. I think that's a very thorough answer.
Thank you. Both of you, let me just find another question. Did you, maybe more for Jay actually, did you find having a routine to be really important throughout the Cape Wrath?
100%. Yeah. Kind of understanding. So we talk about this all the time, but camp admin, just getting everything done that you need to get done, prioritizing things. You've got to be a little bit loose and easy with it sometimes, because you may or may not have a lot of time. But and I think actually you can get a little bit drunk on the luxury of time sometimes and faff a little bit too much. So having a routine, so up first thing every morning, annoy the hell out of Stephen Cousins by popping the valve on my sleeping mat because I knew that he wanted a lie-in.
Oh my God.
And then packing all your stuff away and just getting into that routine of packing stuff away. Go get your food, coming back, getting ready for run. Go and do kit check. Don't pack your bag until you've gone through kit check, because you're going to have to unpack it when they ask for your most obscure item that's most inappropriate for the weather conditions of the day, because they want to know you're carrying it. So don't pack your bag away until you get through. So there's lots of little things that you can learn. And for anyone who does Cape Wrath or Dragon's Back, if the race doesn't turn out for you and you end up dropping onto either the Explorer for Scotland or the Hatchling for Dragon's Back, stick with it, because you will learn so much about camp admin and how the whole thing works. And it's your opportunity to refine all that and to dial it in for maybe, as I did, a shot at the Cape Wrath and then come back to Dragon's Back, or maybe go straight back and try it again. But you will learn so much from staying with the race. I'm not an inexperienced ultra runner, but I learned so much from the Hatchling that was beneficial in Cape Wrath. That it's not wasted time. If you get the opportunity to stay with the race, stick with the race and learn. That would be my advice.
Amazing. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions. How often did you use a map and compass for navigation compared to the watch with GPX? Compared to, yeah. I don't know if that's an open question to everybody. Let me just read that again.
Either on the Spine or the Northern Traverse, I've never needed to, thank goodness, use my map or compass, purely relied on my watch.
I got the map out a few times when my watch was telling me to throw myself lemming-like off the side of a mountain, just for validation.
To double check you're going the right way.
Exactly. You can't sue Koros once you're dead. So it was just kind of for validation that this is the right route, that I've not, screwed up or the watch hasn't gone haywire. I think when the levels of risk increase, I think a quick sanity check is worthwhile. I didn't navigate by map and compass at any point. I did a little bit on Dragon's Back, actually, just for fun, because I was non-competitive. I did a little bit and it was good fun. I could be better on that, by the way, as well. In terms of when the clag comes in on Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back, if the clag's there, you won't be able to sight runners 2 or 3 miles off and choose the best line. And you learn so much during the day about the better lines, because you see people failing. You see people stopping and clambering out of a 6-foot deep bog and changing direction by 90 degrees. And you go, I'm not going that way. That's fantastic. But when you're on small navigation, when you can't see that far ahead, when it's low vis, map and compass is really useful.
Yeah. A question for both of you. If you were limited on time to train per week, what would you recommend in order of importance? Mileage and elevation, time on feet, strength / mobility. What would you focus on the most?
Me to go?
Yeah.
I never focus on mileage or elevation, always time on feet, because you could be living anywhere, you could be covering any sort of ground. Always do your training. I would recommend time. But if you're very limited on time, I'd say if you're thinking about doing any of the Dragon's Back, Cape Wrath, Northern Traverse, I think the first thing is a really good strength foundation. Make sure your body is strong. Make sure that you can, you're carrying poles. That's just like you're carrying a pack, you're carrying poles. You need to be able to hold yourself strong. If you can hold yourself up, your lungs will still work. You can carry your pack. Your core is engaged. You have got to stand. Can you imagine standing for 3 days? You need your frame to. So if you are short on time, you're busy working, you're a parent, you don't need a gym. Get some kettlebells, get a Swiss ball, get that foundation strong, then build the running time-based. Anything that you do training, you've got to be able to recover from. So you've got to be able to recover, and consistency beats anything. So don't look at anybody else, but if you can, even if you're just running 3-4 times a week, being consistent week and week, giving yourself time to build into it with a good solid strength. You got it, Rob. Do it.
There's a ton of books out there, and one of my go-tos was How to Train an Uphill Athlete by Killian Jornet. Knows a few things about how to train, and that kind of validates everything that Eddie's just said.
Oh, me and Gillian, we're
consistency.
so similar and so many.
Is that a picture of him signed on your wall behind you there? You guys
He's
look
always coming round here. He's always coming
like
round here.
that.
Tips.
I'm not being. Do you find that you can't get rid of him? Because sometimes he's like.
Because I can only run with him on recovery runs when I'm going super easy. Otherwise, it's just so slow. So slow.
He's needy as well. He's quite needy.
Eating everything. The size of him.
Well, Charlotte's in the kind of main office at the moment, but in the meeting room we do actually have a signed T-shirt from the World Skyrunner World Championships with Killian's name on it, which she gave to us after
Lovely.
Skyline Scotland a few years ago. I'm conscious that we're running out of time, and I think 90 minutes of us waxing lyrical is probably fair enough. I'm going to wrap up with one question to Jay, then Eddie. As podcast professionals, what would you recommend to our listeners if they were looking to listen to something when they're on their long run this weekend? What would your top recommendation be?
Oh, wow. I mean, do you know what? I genuinely, when I'm listening to podcasts when I'm running, I don't listen to running podcasts. I listen to The Rest is Politics.
Yeah, Rest is Politics is a good one. I'm a bit of a fan.
Rest is Politics, Rest is Football.
I love a Spotify motivational movie playlist. There is nothing like running across mountains, gladiator theme tune running. You're a bit tired, you're a bit cranky, you don't want to go out. Put that on. Oh my God, I'm ready for it.
I'm going to try that. I've not tried that.
Do you sing as well, Eddie?
No, Charlotte, I love it.
In the middle of the field.
Disney classic, and let's just sing along.
I love this.
Oh, that's
Motivation.
wonderful. I wanted to say a huge thank you to my colleague Charlotte, who's stayed late after work to kind of support us tonight. So thank you very much, Charlotte. That's fantastic. Jay from Trail and Error, thank you very much. I'll look forward to chatting with you again at some point, and I think you might be seeing a little bit of me in Cornwall over the next 6 months or so.
A little race coming up for you.
Yeah, I've committed myself. I've actually never done a 100-mile race, so I'm going to do Arc of Attrition in January. So I have my entry. I'm quite excited by that.
Very cool.
Eddie, thank you very much for your time. I always enjoy the banter on Tea and Trails. It does make me chuckle. There's no two ways about that. So everybody listening, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's a bit of a brutal end, I'm afraid, as we hit kind of leave and the whole webinar just comes to an end. So I just want to express my thanks to everybody this evening, and hopefully you'll have some fantastic miles on the trails in the week ahead. So thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, it's just yeah.
Right, so we've got the keys.
How we got the beer? Let's get the off.
It's like the after hours. Yeah, this is. I was about to say the OnlyFans, and that's totally wrong. Yeah.
Well, it's so nice to meet you.
And you.
It's kind of put on the spot. I was like, oh, I'm not sure. And then sometimes be like, I forgot what you actually asked. I've twittered on for so long about something.
Yeah, I definitely felt that at times. I was like,
you did,
oh, shit,
you did great.
Yeah. Oh man, ditto. Whereabouts in France are you?
We are in Morzine.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, well, we're just outside Morzine. So yeah, right in the mountains.
Yeah, nice.
Super lucky. Super
nice.
lucky. Yeah. Nice. Hard life being in the mountains. I mean, you know, kind of there's a romantic view, isn't there? Of like it'd be amazing, but we're in the middle of nowhere, and there's no shops or anything like that. But I love it. It's cool.
Well, I'm doing TDS in 2 months.
I was running with my mate today. She's doing TDS too. Yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
Hard course, but
yeah. I hope I've left enough time between. I think I have between Cape Wrath.
So when was it? A couple of weeks ago now, Cape Wrath.
It's about a month. It finished. So
and
3 month gap.
Yeah.
It's just started running again this week, so it's starting to come back. Oh
yes, you've left. That's what I'd say. You've like left it a really good time to recover, and so now you just need to go hiking, don't you?
Yeah, well, I've got the 2 dogs take care of that. So yeah, plenty of active mobility and recovery and stuff like that. It's funny, isn't it? I think so many people tend to focus on the wrong thing when they're preparing for things. They overthink it sometimes, and
Oh, yeah. I think just like we tried to say, didn't we? Just turning out every day and just doing something, and I think with these big races as well, you kind of just got to do it and enter it, and you're gonna learn as you go and make terrible mistakes.
yeah, and those are the ones that stick with you, right? I
Yeah.
think of the races where I just dodged and got a finish sometimes.
Gary says everyone's still watching us.
I figured they were. We've still got like 21
Everybody,
people.
we're having the after party.
These are the cool. This is like the people that sit in the cinema when the credits have gone up, and the lights have come on, and they're looking around in the empty kind of popcorn boxes for something to eat. This is the crowd. These are the credits guys.
Yeah, these are the best bits. These are the best bits. This is what we're here for. Yeah. So everybody, just throw yourself into the race. Just do it. Don't overthink it. And
yeah,
the nice thing now about Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath is that you can do those. If it goes wrong, you haven't lost like thousands of pounds and all that time and all that kit, and you can stay in the race.
It's so and the crazy thing is, because I've finished one competitively and one non-competitively now, and I didn't really feel any different. No, there's no segregation between the runners.
Yeah,
Everyone's in
Gary,
it.
When he did Dragon's Back, I was like, was there? Did you get a bit like, because they were back at camp and you were like, and he's like, you don't really know, you don't really notice, because
no,
we're also selfish as runners anyway, aren't we? We're only focusing on ourselves anyway.
Right, we should let everyone go for dinner.
Yeah, bye everybody. Thanks
Thanks for staying for the Jay and Eddie podcast.
Best after party ever. Nice to meet you, Jay.
And you take care, mate. Bye bye.